Hello and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we cover the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion, and today I am joined by the panel, Chief Bob Horton and Chief Jeff Buchanan. Also joining us today is a friend of the show, Dr. Andrew Holter. If you're new to Fire Headlines, Andrew is an organizational psychologist, owner and principal consultant for FR Strategies. And we're very happy to have him back as a reoccurring guest. Our topic today is preventing firefighter injuries. FEMA has recently awarded Georgia Southern University a $1.1 million grant to help researchers assist firefighters with injury mitigation, better work outcomes, and reduction in financial burdens. Now, while I was reading this article, I was reminded of my time as a collegiate athlete because it mentioned things such as a nutrition specialist and athletic trainers. And we would spend a lot of time learning how to take care of our bodies and get the best results out of our performances. So this made me wonder, Jeff, during your time in the fire service, did you have any coaching or classes on how to properly fuel your body for this type of duty in the fire service?
First of all, Samantha, thanks for the lead in. Good to be here with everybody on the podcast today. Yeah, actually I did. I don't want to say cutting edge. I don't want to go overboard here, but North Las Vegas was dabbling, and actually Las Vegas was too, as I recall, with UNLV, and they were bringing in science and they were bringing in actual trainers, and we were going through this sort of, it wound up being like a year or 2 year time frame where we were doing regular check-ins with certain physical assessments, and there was some nutritional guidance as well. And so the answer to that question is yes. And I, at least anecdotally, I feel like in Southern Nevada for sure, there has been opportunities and access to such things. Over the course of my career, I've seen it. It's definitely undulated ups and downs, more engaged, less engaged. But, what this article did for me, really being thoughtful or reflective on the word integrative approach, it really spells out 4 things. 1 is nutrition. 2 is physical activity. 3 is our PPE. And then 4 is sleep. And I really hope that this integrative study incorporates all of them, because together they are all huge contributing factors to illness and injury in firefighters. And I just feel like to some extent we turn a blind eye at bits and pieces of it. And I just don't know how much progress we're making. And let me give you a couple, for examples. I'm a big fan of eating. I'm good at it. It's one of my skills in life. I love to eat. And firefighters make outstanding, and I mean outstanding meals. They're some of the best meals I ever had were at a fire station, gourmet level. I mean, it was great. And the other piece that was great, it was all you can eat. And I ate a ton, and it was all about portion control. And I just think that nutrition is a piece of the puzzle that's difficult. The 24-hour shifts, as awesome as they are for me as a firefighter, I think that they're a contributing factor. I think that there is levels of physical activity. Some firefighters, they're really active. Some don't do anything. And then there's the PPE portion of it where you just never know what that intersection is with all of them. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, Samantha. Yes, I did get coaching and early on and throughout my career. I'm just not quite sure if that's really the difference into making a healthy firefighter.
Andrew, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a firefighter myself, I went through the Connecticut State Fire Academy, and we had a lead PT instructor who was very much into coaching us, not only on physical health, but also mental and nutritional wellness. And so I definitely think it's important. But to Jeff's point, there's definitely a lot of pieces of the puzzle. And one of those is even from an organizational perspective is like the culture. Happy workers get injured less at work. They are looking to cut fewer corners. They're more in line with following established policies or SOGs. And so if you have engaged and happy workers, that's another piece of it too. What is the culture of your organization? And I think that's, for the fire service, I think that's just as important as our physical fitness level when it comes to injury prevention.
Andrew, I love you for bringing that up. That is something that it's why it's so valuable to have you on the show, to give that slice of perspective that I'm just not sure if we would have been able to highlight it. And I just think that is outstanding, that there is data and research to support that a more fulfilled employee is less apt to get injured, because I do think that that's a struggle inside of the fire service today. It's almost cliche, low morale. I don't know of a fire department that's out there, at least that's vocal about it, saying that they have awesome morale. It seems as though every fire department has some level of low morale, and then hyperbole gets to them to the point where it's the lowest it's ever been. And if I've heard that once, I've heard that, a number of times too. And I think that happiness, and again, that fulfillment and the contributing factor to injury, is certainly incentive for organizations to take that seriously and to try to crack that egg. And that's a tough egg to crack. I think that once someone figures out the ability to repeat performance on building outstanding morale, then that person's going to be a billionaire, because that is a tough one to accomplish. It really is. And I know that there's many out there that tried, and I certainly was one. As an administrator, I strive to make dents into that, and it's difficult. It really is. It's a super big challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I think if more organizations could figure that out, that would change a lot of things, and it would take a lot of consultants and stuff out of business. But it's definitely, I think that piece of it is the piece that the fire service in particular, though, whereas the private sector has been a little bit quicker to adopt and look at that, the fire service has kind of lagged behind on those things, and relied on our traditionalist view of things, or the fire service culture as a historical type of thing, as opposed to trying to create that culture that exists where people work safe because they want to, and that they're minding that and they're concerned about that.
Bob and Andrew, this is a question I want your opinion on as well, but let's bring Bob into the conversation. Bob, what are your thoughts on fire departments having an athletic trainer on staff for their firefighters, similar to how sport teams do? Or do you know of any fire departments that are already maybe taking this direction?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. There are some fire departments that have real aggressive wellness programs that have folks like physical therapists and athletic trainers on staff. Now, they're usually large metro departments that have a budget to be able to sustain some level of staff like that. But whether you staff somebody with that expertise, or you contract with a local provider that can do it for you, say several small organizations, which is something I was really interested in doing in Oregon, where I was at, bringing together all of the organizations together and being able to contract with a wellness clinic. And there's a lot of reasons why that never came to fruition. But I think it is necessary. And let's be honest, like, having a coach for any aspect of sustainability in your career, whatever that is, executive leadership coach, a health and wellness coach, nutrition coach, et cetera, is better off than not having one. If we're making this analogy to professional athletes or collegiate athletes, none of these athletes would be, well, I shouldn't say none, too absolute. A gross majority of athletes are successful because they have resources like this and coaches who are at their disposal to make them better and make them perform better. So applying that ideology into the fire service makes a lot of sense to me. But there's a lot of differences in these athletes too. Like, I get it. I get the tactical athlete approach and saying, like, this is a very physically demanding job and we have to prepare folks to be able to do it. When you're playing sports in college or professional, you are selected specifically for your athletic prowess, and you are looked at whatever the life cycle of the particular sport you play is. You're going to come into college, do 4 or 5 years and move on to pro, or for most college athletes, move on to something else other than sports. So you are fueling the machine with those resources for say 4 to 5 years and whatever. I don't know the lifespan of a typical, it depends on your position too, of say like an NFL football athlete. The point I'm illustrating is that we're looking at 25 to 30 year careers of firefighters. And it's a different approach to how they sustain wellness throughout that lifetime. So your employment is different than you're being paid or incentivized in some other way to be an athlete and perform a certain way. So I just wanted to highlight what I see as being some of the differences between an athlete approach and what we're trying to accomplish in the fire service. I'm not rejecting the idea. I think the idea of integrating wellness programs like this one that they got funded in Georgia to do is really important. Here's where I see some of the issues. Number one, if athletes don't perform, they get cut from the team, frankly, and they bring in new athletes to do the job. That isn't how the fire service works broadly. So that gets me to this point of autonomy. It's unclear in this article how this program is being implemented. Is it an opt-in program? Is it an opt-out? Is it mandatory that folks are going to have to participate? It seems like there's probably energy and enthusiasm to do so. The point I'm highlighting is that the barrier to many of these initiatives, I would argue is not administration, although it may be, because there is good evidence in programs like this on how it saves money. It's a culture of labor unions. What happens when someone doesn't perform to a standard that we need? What happens when they're non-compliant with what the nutritionist recommendations were doing? Because you could bring in a nutritional coach all day long. If it doesn't change your behavior 2/3 of the time when you're not working, then you're not going to see the results. You're not going to optimize the results of that. And assuming for 1 second you can control what people are eating and or doing while they're at work. So there is enough evidence for us to know that just simply providing this information to folks isn't sufficient. It isn't sufficient. How does it integrate into the program? And this is where you start to see interests in bargaining to say, well, if we perform at a high level of athleticism or superiority, I want additional funds, additional money, incentives, pay incentives for folks who pass a certain score or what have you. I mean, so this is where it starts to become slightly more nuanced than whether or not a program in the system is good or not. I want to be clear. I think it is. And I think our firefighters should have access to these types of resources, strength and conditioning, athletic trainers, nutrition specialists, mental skills experts. I think that should be part of the culture of what it is that we're trying to build. The barriers aren't always the administration and its willingness to fund. It's how do we create a program that makes sense, that does get this return on investment or cost savings or reinvestment in the employee that this project's trying to do. And then I'll leave it with this. They highlight about cost savings to the healthcare system overall, like long term. If you have these things when you come into the fire service and throughout your career, how does that save the health system? I think that's a good cost benefit analysis to have. The other piece to where this work is really demonstrating its success is firefighters who are injured recovering, and the recovery time is substantially faster when you are supported with healthcare resources like what's being talked about here versus a conventional workers' comp model where you got to go through physical therapy for so many months, and then when that doesn't work, then maybe you'll get the MRI 9 months later when your ankle is healed, partially healed incorrectly, and that whole thing's a mess. And meanwhile, you're off completely unhappy, and someone's working your shifts on overtime and the costs associated with that. This is the right direction. This is where we need to go. I want to have stronger conversations at the table of what does this look like as a system, as overall, because right now is if there's autonomy, if there's choice in the employees and they opt out to do that, what does that ultimately look like? And then how do we support a workforce for this is a life, this is a life cycle of being a firefighter. This isn't, you're working a third of the time, and I'm just generalizing that, a third and 2/3 you're not. And then you're living life like the rest of those timeframes, and you're out doing, high risk sports or you're not, or you're a couch potato when you're not at work. And so there's just, again, highlighting some of the nuanced differences between treating our workforces, athletes, and what athletes are going through, at least as I understand it. Because I was not a collegiate athlete like you were, Samantha, with your humble brag of your athletics.
Hey, I'm not in the fire service, so it's as close as I can relate to you guys.
I was just jumping in with Bob. I don't want him to row in that boat alone. I wasn't a college athlete either, man. It's all good.
All right, Angie, but let's hear some of your thoughts on that topic of the culture of having that mentally health and physically health atmosphere in the fire department, and whether an athletic trainer can help in those situations.
Sure. I think anything like that is a piece of the puzzle, right? And both Jeff and Bob have kind of hinted at that a little bit. If we're going to start adopting the industrial athlete sort of mantra for the fire service, which has been kind of running in parallel to us in general industry for 20 years, we have to look at it as a holistic thing and provide all those elements that come with it, from active release therapies and physical therapy and strength training and athletic training to folks that can talk about mental health and substance abuse and other problems that seem to surface quite a bit in the fire service, and how folks can mitigate and mediate those things so that they don't become a problem for them. Just like our relationship with food, I'm right there with Jeff on Firehouse meals. In fact, I still 10 years later still make some of those Firehouse recipes at home now. And so all of that has to come together. And I think you have to look at, the full life cycle of a firefighter coming into the fire service. How do we keep that person in serviceable condition throughout the next 25 years or 30 years or whatever we're asking them to do while they're here with our organization? And if we really take a look at it that way, my personal belief is that the rest of those things will come along with it. The culture will happen, because if we're making a deliberate effort to provide for and care for our firefighters, people are very perceptive, and they're going to see that the agency or the organization is working in their best interest and is out there trying to fight to take care of them. And I truly believe that that's a big part of it. Is the organization taking care of me? Is my employer looking out for me? And if we're doing these things, that will kind of bring the culture along with it.
I want to throw in a couple points on that, because I do agree with you. And I want to kind of zoom out for a second and just add into this conversation that I think sometimes there's a misperception about firefighters that they're somehow different than society. And the reality is firefighters are a swath of society. And in other words, there's going to be, although, divorce rates are higher, there's certain traits that are higher, yes. But there is, if you look at general society and you look at some of the characteristics of firefighters, they're just a microcosm of society. I think we would all agree with that. And if you look at society as a whole, and you just take you take a binary approach, eat better, and do some sort of physical activity, the world or the United States doesn't do really well with information, even though they know if you eat better and you have physical activity, there isn't improvements. Well, I would argue that the information has been out there for a long time for firefighters to do whatever types of physical activity will improve you, whatever type of nutrition, it would improve you. I don't disagree. I wholeheartedly agree. I think a whole suite of options should be available for actually complete municipalities, but with focuses on police departments and fire departments for PT and nutrition and working out. But I think really where we need to focus is more in the nudging area. In other words, trying to focus in on the psychology and the aspect of people that is preventing them or a barrier to taking that good advice. We keep proposing and showing, hey, if you eat like this, or if you do this type of functional exercise, it will help you. And I'm just not sure that we're getting the advancements and the improvement that we're looking for. And so I think maybe it's in its approach that maybe we could have a little bit more advancement, because while I do agree with the integrative approaches that we're discussing and tying them all together, I'm skeptical at the effectiveness, because it's in that nudging piece where I feel like we continually come up short, but maybe because that's the hardest problem to solve.
What I struggle with is And I did when I was running health and wellness programs, I do to this day. What is firefighter fit and what does that actually mean? And because you could read a program like this or listen to our conversation and reach some conclusion that to be a firefighter, you have to be some kind of mega athlete or be able to have competed in Division I sports. And we're absolutely saying that is not what this, that's what I'm saying is that's not what this is. So what is marginally fit? What is optimally fit? What is superiorly fit? And what obligation or certain programs do we do to support this? Because a lot of regular people, to your point about a cross section of our community that are firefighters, were never college athletes. We're not even high school athletes. And by most metrics, if not all, they're successful as being firefighters. So what standard are we training them to, and how are we managing that and maintaining it as we proceed through life and we get older and things change? We, as an industry, broadly do a decent job at the academy level. In fact, in most organizations, that's the only level we do, a prescribed wellness routine or fitness routine, highly scheduled, through your academy. And then you go into the firefighter profession. And many of our organizations, we never assess fitness again. Maybe a wellness test, an annual or biannual wellness test that you do through your physicals, but you're not going through the rigor of what strength and conditioning coaches would want you to go through. And some organizations do have that annual standards that you have to meet, right? And you hear standard, and now you bring in that union culture that I was talking about earlier. And what does that look like? So, there's a lot of room to improve where we're at as an industry in terms of wellness between where we're at today and getting all the way to a point where we're staffing these types of resources for full-blown programs. I'm glad we're having the conversation. I'm glad the industry is having the conversation, because this type of investment in our workforce at whatever level it is, somewhere between today and where we can be, what optimally can be, needs to happen. And we need to make those investments.
I would just add into Bob that arguably there's too many firefighters that are in the best condition of their lives after an academy. And then there's no sense of kind of reevaluation as they go through your careers, and just totally agree with those points that Bob's saying. It's what level are we training to? And then what level do we train in sustainability?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of great points. And, to Jeff's point, that nudging, I think each organization has to determine what fit means for them or what their standard is. And they have to establish that, and then they have to hold people accountable to it. And to Bob's point, that's where it does become very complicated if you're in a collective bargaining environment, and how that's going to work and how you're going to apply that. And, I don't know if there are unions that are out there that are meeting agencies in the middle to have a standard that they're going to hold people to, so that it's it's a safety issue, and that we're accepting a certain minimum for folks that are still on the job. But I definitely think it's important as a former career firefighter. It's comforting knowing that the people who are riding with you can come take care of you physically, that's not part of the question. And so, that always kind of made me feel good that the people I was riding with were going to be able to come get me. And, I think as any other firefighter in any other department, you want that same feeling. You want to know that the folks around you are physically capable of helping you if they need to.
Absolutely. I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to see what comes out of this study. But thank you, Andrew and Chiefs, for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. A link to the article we discussed can be found in the show notes. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And if you have a question for the panel, please reach out to us at fireheadlines@wfca.com and let us know what's on your mind. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.